A man stands ankle-deep in a valley of bleached human bones. The sun beats down on a basin of absolute death. They lack the one element required for existence. So the voice commands the prophet a second time. But the Ruach is not always a hurricane. It is not always an earthquake, a parted sea, or a rushing wind that shatters rocks. Because centuries later, a different prophet will go looking for this exact same force. And to find it, he will have to step out of a mountain cave and listen for something that sounds like the exact opposite of a storm. If you are waiting for the storm, you are not alone. You press your knees into a hardwood floor, asking for the kind of Ruach that shatters the obstacles in your life, that sweeps away the chaos in a single, violent display of power. You want the Red Sea weapon. You want the dramatic, undeniable proof that the Creator is fighting on your behalf. And when the air remains completely still, when the medical diagnosis doesn't change, when the foreclosure notice arrives, when the darkness in your bedroom feels thick enough to choke on you, assume the Spirit has simply left the building. So you try to manufacture the wind yourself. You assume that your lack of progress is a sign of divine abandonment. When the sea in front of you does not part, you start swimming across it in your own strength, fighting the current until your muscles give out. You work longer hours to force a breakthrough, trying to manipulate your circumstances while carrying the heavy, crushing weight of your own survival in your chest. Prophesy to the wind. Come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe into these slain, that they may live. And your clenched jaw. You wake up every morning already tired, staring at a glaring phone screen at 2 in the morning, wondering why. The heavens feel like solid iron. It is a phantom fatigue, a bone-deep, modern exhaustion that comes from trying to blow the sea apart with your own limited lungs. We are a species addicted to the spectacular, assuming that if God is present, he must be loud. We desperately want a God who fixes our problems with a sudden, overwhelming gust of wind, because a hurricane requires nothing from us but to stand still and watch. The stillness is not an absence. It is a recalibration. The prophet who walked into that mountain cave was carrying this exact same fatigue. His name was Elijah, and he was a man who knew the loud, violent power of God better than anyone alive. He had just stood on the summit of Mount Carmel and called down literal fire from the sky to consume a water-soaked altar. He had just felt the supernatural surge of energy required to physically outrun a royal chariot in a blinding rainstorm. But now, the adrenaline has completely crashed. One death threat from a wicked queen, and the great prophet breaks, fleeing into the desolate wilderness until his feet bleed and his vision blurs. He walks into a cave at Mount Horeb, wraps his heavy cloak tightly. The wind hits the valley. The dust swirls. The chests rise. The eyes open. An exceedingly great army stands on its feet, around his shoulders against the cold dampness of the stone walls, and begs God to let him die. He is burned out. He is exhausted. He expects the loud, dramatic wind to come and validate his anger. But the Creator is about to show him that the Ruach operates on more than one frequency. Elijah stands in the mouth of the cave. The instruction is clear. Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord. So he waits. And then the physical world begins to violently unravel. A great and powerful wind tears the mountains apart. The Hebrew word here is Ruach. You can hear the limestone cracking. You can watch massive boulders tumbling down the cliff face, shattering into dust. It is the Ruach at its most terrifying. It is the sea-splitting, chaos-breaking force the prophet expects. But the text says something shocking. The Lord is not in the wind. Then the ground buckles. An earthquake shakes the foundation of the mountain. You can feel the violent vibrations in the soles of your feet. Dust chokes the thin air. But the Lord is not in the earthquake. Then the temperature spikes. A fire sweeps across the ridge. You can smell the burning scrub brush. The sudden heat blisters the skin. But the Lord is not in the fire. Wind, earthquake, fire. 3 massive displays of power. 3 forces that can destroy an empire. 3 things an exhausted prophet expects from the God who answers from the sky. Most people read this story and assume it is just a supernatural magic trick, a metaphor for national revival. And then, a sudden drop in pressure, a sound of sheer silence, a low whisper, a thin, quiet breath. Elijah hears it. He does not cover his face during the rock slide. He does not hide from the earthquake. He does not flinch at the fire. But when he hears the whisper, he pulls his heavy leather mantle over his face. He wraps his head in the dark and steps out onto the ledge. Why? Because he recognizes the presence. The Ruach is not always a weapon of mass destruction. It is the breath required to speak a word of comfort. God is showing the burned-out prophet that the exact same force that tears kingdoms apart is also the quiet respiration sustaining a fragile human mind. The Spirit does not always shout. Sometimes, it simply breathes life back into a broken man in the desert, giving him bread, giving him water, and telling him to sleep. It is all the same, Ruach. The wind and the breath are one. But a few centuries later, the political map of the world shifts. An empire falls. Another rises. And the language of the streets completely changes. The Hebrew texts are read in a new tongue. A new word enters the vocabulary of the 1st century Mediterranean, and a carpenter from Nazareth will sit on a rooftop at midnight, talking to a powerful religious scholar, using a Greek word that carries this exact same wild, untamable double meaning, a theological picture of resurrection. But if you look closer, at the exact Hebrew word firing off like a drumbeat 10 times in this single vision, Jesus sits on a rooftop in Jerusalem, talking to a man named Nicodemus under the cover of absolute darkness. You can feel the heavy humidity of a Judean night. The religious leader is confused, trying to understand how a man can be born a second time. He wants a theological system. He wants a rigid, academic checklist. And Jesus answers him by pointing to the weather. The wind blows where it wishes, and you hear its sound, but you do not know where it comes from or where it goes. So it is with everyone who is born of the Spirit. The word Jesus uses here, translated in your English Bible as both wind and spirit, in the exact same breath, is the Greek pneuma. When the Hebrew scriptures were translated into Greek, and when the New Testament authors sat down to document the birth of the church, this was the word they chose to carry the immense weight of the ancient Ruach. It comes from the root verb neo, which simply means to blow or to breathe out. It appears nearly 400 times in the New Testament. And just like its Hebrew ancestor, pneuma absolutely refuses to separate the physical lungs from the divine presence, or the meteorological weather from the sacred. Jesus is deliberately playing on this double meaning. He is telling a rigid, highly educated scholar that the divine presence cannot be boxed into a religious framework. You realize you are looking at something much older. For centuries, we have read this text through a modern filter, any more than you can catch a midnight breeze in a jar. You can hear it rattle the wooden shutters of the roof. You can feel the sudden drop in temperature on your skin. But you cannot dictate its origin, and you cannot control its destination. That root changes everything about how the early church experienced God, because just a few weeks later, a group of terrified men and women are hiding in an upper room, waiting for a promise they do not fully understand. Acts chapter 2 tells us that suddenly, a sound like a "it's 9" rushing wind fills the entire house. The Greek word used for that roaring wind is pneu, a direct cousin of pneuma. And immediately, the text says they are filled with the Holy Spirit, the pneuma. The dark storm over the Genesis ocean hits the room. The breath that woke the mud of Eden fills the house. The Holy Spirit is not a polite theological doctrine waiting to be memorized in a sterile classroom. It is the untamable wind of the Creator, blowing the doors off an upper room. It is the exact same force, crossing language barriers, moving from Hebrew to Greek without losing a single ounce of its terrifying, life-giving weight. But the most beautiful part of this single, unbroken thread from Genesis to Pentecost is not just what it did to the ancient world. It is what it means for the heavy, exhausted chest you are carrying right now. We have taken one massive, untamable Hebrew word and chopped it into 3 polite English categories. We separated the weather from the divine. A wind swept over a chaotic black ocean, and the friction of creation began. A creator exhaled into cold red clay, and the dust opened its eyes. An east wind hit a trapped sea, and a highway of dry ground appeared. A breeze blew through a valley of scattered bones, and a dead army stood on its feet. A prophet wrapped his face in a dark cave and heard a whisper that sustained his life. A scholar sat on a humid roof at midnight and learned he could not control the weather. An upper room heard a violent roar, and a frightened church burst through the doors. Same word, same breath, same God. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the phantom fatigue of Elijah, a man wrapping his heavy leather mantle over his face in the mouth of a cave. Realizing that the power he needed was not in the rockslide, we spend so much of our lives begging for the earthquake. We want the roaring east wind to split our impossibilities in half. And when we don't see the limestone cracking or the fire falling, we assume the spirit is absent. We separated the lungs from the soul. The Spirit of God is not a translucent ghost hovering in a church sanctuary. If you are in a season where the air feels completely still, where you are exhausted from trying to manufacture your own wind, trying to force your own breakthrough, while your jaw clenches in the dark, you do not need to blow the sea apart yourself. The Spirit is not just the hurricane. It is the steady, quiet rhythm filling your lungs right now, keeping you alive when you have nothing left to give. And may the God who holds the 4 winds of the earth hold the heavy rhythm of your chest tonight and remind you that every breath you borrow is proof that He has not left the room. It is the wild, physical energy of creation. The rattling in that ancient valley was not just a demonstration of biology. It was a reminder of a singular, unified force that our modern language has fundamentally fractured. Because somewhere along the way, we put a scalpel to the ancient mind. The air is stagnant, heavy, and completely still. He is a priest who has lost his temple. He is a prophet who has lost his home. The modern mind operates like a sterile autopsy table. We like to take reality, lay it out under bright fluorescent lights, and dissect it into neat, manageable categories. We are obsessed with organizing the universe. We place biology in one bucket, meteorology in another, and religion in a third, making sure the contents never bleed into one another. When we feel our chest expand and oxygen fill our lungs, we call it respiration. When we hear the trees bending and leaves scraping against the glass of our windows, we pull out a smartphone and check the barometric pressure to monitor the wind speed. And when we sit in a quiet room and feel a sudden, transcendent sense of awe, we call it a spiritual experience. 3 different phenomena, 3 different dictionary definitions, 3 entirely separate compartments of human life. But this division is not a natural law of the universe. It is a linguistic amputation. The ancient writers of the Hebrew scriptures did not think like we do. They did not have a secular category and a sacred category. They did not view the physical world as a dirty, temporary shell and the spiritual world as an invisible, floating reality somewhere in the clouds. To the ancient Near Eastern mind, the material and the immaterial were completely, seamlessly woven together. When we read the Bible in English, we project our modern autopsy table onto an ancient, living text. We read the word spirit and our brains. Ezekiel stands in a mass grave that stretches to the horizon, surrounded by the physical evidence of his people's total destruction. Instantly strip away all the physical weight. We imagine something ethereal, something ghostly, something that happens purely in our emotions or our private thoughts. But the authors of the text were not writing about a religious feeling. They were describing a tangible, overwhelming force of nature. To them, the invisible world was not less real than the physical world. It was the very engine driving it. The breath in your throat and the storm breaking the cedar trees outside your door were not 2 different things. They were the exact same mechanism, operating at different scales. The spiritual life is not an escape from the physical world. It is the raw, animating voltage running through it. And this is where the English translations fail us, because in the original language, there are not three different words for wind, breath, and spirit. There is only one, and it does not make its first appearance in a valley of dry bones. To feel the sheer force of this word, you have to rewind the scroll. You have to go all the way back to a dark, chaotic ocean, before the very first command of creation was ever spoken. Picture the beginning, not a garden yet, just a violent, empty ocean, total darkness, a formless void, water stretching into absolute blackness. And then, a voice speaks to him in the dry silence. It asks a question that borders on cruel. Can these bones live? There is no light. There is no land. There is no time. And then, something moves. Moses writes the opening lines of the Torah, and he sets a scene of pure, unorganized chaos. The earth is formless and empty. Darkness covers the face of the deep. But in verse 2, a force enters the frame. An invisible energy sweeps over the surface of the waters. Most English Bibles translate this as the Spirit of God hovering over the deep. We picture a peaceful, glowing apparition floating above a quiet lake. But this is not a ghost hovering over a puddle. It is a hurricane brooding over a black ocean. It is a massive, dark wind, generating the friction required for creation. It is kinetic. It is loud. It is raw power. The wind howls before the light ever breaks. The chaos of the deep is met by an equally overwhelming, invisible force. Now, move forward. Genesis chapter 2. The camera zooms in. The oceans are pushed back. The dry land appears. God kneels in the dirt. You can smell the damp soil. You can feel the heavy humidity of a young earth. He gathers the red clay. He forms a shape: head, torso, arms, legs. He builds a masterpiece. But it is just wet mud. It has no heartbeat. It has no pulse. Ezekiel does not say yes. He does not say no. He simply says, "O Lord God, you know, it is a beautifully structured corpse, lying perfectly still in the dirt. It is exactly like the dry bones Ezekiel will see centuries later." And then, the Creator leans in. He puts his mouth over the mouth of the clay. He exhales. A sudden rush of air hits the cold mud. The lungs expand. The chest rises. The blood begins to pump. The eyes snap open. The dust becomes a living, breathing soul. The first man inhales. He takes a breath. The wind that swept over the chaotic ocean is now filling the lungs of the dirt. Creation is not a distant, sterile decree. It is a violent, physical transfer of energy. Look at the pattern. The wind organizes the water. The breath animates the dirt. Two entirely different scenes. Two different physical elements. When we read it in English, we translate one as spirit and the other as breath. We split the weather from the biology. But Moses did not use two different words. He did not separate the meteorological storm from the biological respiration. He used the exact same word for both. And when you look at how this word is built, you realize it is not a normal word at all. It is an acoustic mimicry of life itself. When you read the Genesis creation account, or when you watch Ezekiel standing in a valley of dry bones, you are encountering a reality that modern English translators simply cannot capture with a single term. And then the command comes. The prophet opens his mouth and speaks to the dust. The stillness breaks. The word underlying the wind over the dark ocean, the breath in the lungs of the first man, and the spirit animating the dead army is the Hebrew word Ruach. It appears nearly 400 times in the Old Testament, and its meaning is wild, untamed, and intensely physical. Gur. Our English Bibles translate this one Hebrew word into three different concepts depending on the context: spirit, wind, or breath. But the ancient writers were not choosing between three distinct ideas. To them, Ruach was a single, unifying reality. If you say it out loud, pulling that hard. Guttural KH sound from the very back of your throat. The word itself is an acoustic mimicry of its meaning. It sounds exactly like a harsh, heavy exhalation, or a violent gust of wind scraping against the stone walls of a canyon. The sound is the definition. If something about this ancient way of seeing the world is stirring up questions you've never considered, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe. Because every week, we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So the ancient Hebrew mind viewed the entire physical universe. A low, terrifying rumble starts in the earth. A violent rattling echoes off the canyon walls. Femur slides against pelvis. Ribcage locks into spine, as being constantly sustained by this exact energy. You can see this worldview perfectly articulated in the poetry of Psalm 104. The writer is marveling at the vast ecosystem of the earth. From the lions hunting in the dark, to the ships sailing across the sea. And he makes a profound observation about how it all stays alive. When you hide your face, they are dismayed. When you take away their Ruach, they die and return to their dust. When you send forth your Ruach, they are created. Notice the absolute dependence. The biological functioning of every living creature on the planet is directly tethered to the active, ongoing presence of God. That root changes everything about how we understand our own existence. When you take a breath right now, your lungs expanding and oxygen flooding your bloodstream, you are not just participating in an autonomous biological function. You are borrowing the Ruach of the Creator. The Spirit is not a separate, ghostly entity trapped inside a physical shell. It is the breath of God currently occupying your lungs. This is the revelation that the Western autopsy table completely destroys. We think we can breathe on our own. Skulls attached to vertebrae. Sinews stretch like heavy cables over the white calcium. And skin pulls tight over the frames, while ignoring the divine. But the biblical text argues that the very mechanism allowing you to deny the Creator is the breath He is actively loaning you to speak the words. Ruach is not a religious concept you study in a sanctuary. It is the biological reality keeping you alive in this exact second. But this invisible force is not just a biological life support system. When Ruach is weaponized, it alters the geography of the earth itself. 1 million runaway slaves stand trapped on a beach. You can hear the screaming of terrified children. You can feel the earth shaking under the thundering hooves of 600 Egyptian chariots closing in from the west. And in front of them, an impassable expanse of deep, dark water. There is no fleet of ships waiting. There is no bridge. There is only the salty spray of the sea hitting their faces and the impending slaughter at their backs. Moses walks to the edge of the water. He raises a piece of dead wood. And then, Exodus chapter 14 says, God drives the sea back. How does he do it? He does not just snap his fingers and make the water disappear. The text tells us he uses a strong east wind. The valley is no longer a graveyard of scattered bones. It is a valley of standing corpses, beautifully assembled, perfectly structured, completely dead, that blows all night long. The Hebrew word is Ruach, the exact same word used in the Valley of Dry Bones, the exact same word used in the Garden of Eden, the exact same word used over the primordial deep. The Ruach that organized the chaos of creation now splits a Red Sea. The Ruach that breathed life into the mud now dries out a muddy seabed. The Ruach that will one day reassemble a graveyard of bones now breaks the backbone of an empire. The wind hits the water with such physical violence that the sea literally tears in half. The water stands up. The mud turns to dust. A highway opens in the middle of an ocean. This is not a meteorological anomaly. It is the weaponized breath of the Creator, blowing the doors off a prison. When you understand that Ruach is both the breath in your lungs and the storm splitting the sea, you start to see the sheer scale of what the biblical authors are communicating. The Spirit of God is not a passive, comforting feeling you get during a quiet prayer. It is a force capable of rearranging the geography of the earth. It is a power that dismantles armies and rewrites the laws of physics. It is loud, It is terrifying. It is entirely out of human control.